Okay, so they might not always dominate the headlines, but there's this pretty complex web of criminal activity stretching all the way from Bucharest right across Europe, even into the Americas.
Hmm.
We're diving into the world of Romanian organized crime networks today, sometimes called the Clănuri Interlope.
Yeah, and their reach is, well, it's genuinely surprising, especially when you consider they often operate with, let's say, less public fanfare than some other big international syndicates.
Right. And that's kind of the goal for this deep dive, isn't it? To really unpack the origins, what they actually do, the sort of criminal activities involved, and what makes these Romanian groups distinct.
Exactly. We'll explore how they've managed to set up shop across continents,
Right.
getting into various illicit markets, often in pretty unique ways.
And we know you're tuning in because you want to get the real picture, the important stuff, without getting totally bogged down in endless details. So we've done the sifting.
Yep. We've pulled out the crucial insights and honestly some really unexpected facts about this powerful, but yeah, often less publicized criminal underworld.
Okay, let's get right into it then. Where does this whole story begin? What are the origins?
Well, the roots really trace back to Romania itself, late 1980s. That's when you see the initial formation of these groups they called Clănuri Interlope.
Clănuri Interlope, so like underworld clans.
Basically, yeah. Think family-based or at least very tightly knit criminal groups. Kind of like clans in other contexts, but operating, in the criminal sphere. But to really get it, you need to look back at the communist era before that, under Nicolae Ceausescu.
Right, because it wasn't like a classic mafia situation back then, was it?
No, not in the way we might picture it today.
Yeah.
Under that really strict communist regime, any large-scale organized crime was pretty much state-controlled, or at least heavily suppressed.
Oh.
But that oppressive environment, it did sort of foster lower-level stuff, smuggling, corruption,
Yeah.
things happening through informal networks.
Mm.
And interestingly, these networks sometimes had quiet links within the regime itself. Those were the initial sparks, you could say.
Ah, okay. So the big shift happens when the regime collapses in '89. That created a kind of power vacuum and opportunity for these networks.
Precisely. The whole transition to democracy, to a market economy,
Yeah.
it was incredibly chaotic. That political instability, the economic turmoil, it was basically the perfect breeding ground.
For those informal networks to step up.
Exactly. To evolve, be more structured, more sophisticated. And crucially, they started building international connections, especially within Europe, what would later become the EU. Think Italy, Spain, the UK.
Mm.
Those were key early expansion zones.
And the early '90s, that's when things really kicked off, driven by all that social upheaval.
Yeah, that period saw a major upswing. Social instability, this intense drive for quick money, it fueled a big increase in drug trafficking, human trafficking, extortion.
Mm.
And these groups, they weren't just staying in Romania anymore.
Right, they started moving outwards.
They were extending their reach, often following the paths of Romanian migrants who were heading to other European countries looking for, a better life.
Then fast forward to 2007, Romania joins the EU. That must have been a game changer for operating internationally.
Oh, absolutely. A massive turning point.
Yeah.
EU membership, the free movement of people that came with it, it was like pouring gasoline on the fire for their international expansion.
Made crossing borders much easier.
Suddenly, yeah, national borders were much less of an obstacle. And this is when human trafficking, in particular, becomes a really prevalent crime linked to these networks operating abroad. Vulnerable people, often women, kids, trafficked for sex work, forced labor, lured by false promises. It's grim.
Yeah, it paints a really disturbing picture. And the sheer range of their criminal activities is, well, it's vast, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, the sources we looked at detailed this incredibly broad spectrum, both international and domestic stuff.
Yeah.
You've got human trafficking, obviously, the illegal drug trade, prostitution, even murder.
Okay.
There's cigarette smuggling, extortion, cybercrime, which is a growing area, arms trafficking, property crime, racketeering, which is, running illegal operations or shaking people down.
Right, protection rackets and the like.
Exactly. And even quite specific things like RFID skimming.
RFID skimming, like contactless card theft.
Yeah, secretly reading the data off contactless cards. Plus, online automotive fraud, wire fraud, robbery, loan sharking, assault, kidnapping, theft, contract killing. I mean, the list just goes on.
Wow. RFID skimming. That's quite niche. Really shows how adaptable they are, exploiting technology.
It absolutely does. But they've definitely built a global reputation in certain, let's say, specialties. ATM skimming is a big one. They're known for worldwide.
Yeah.
Pimping, controlling prostitution rings. And drug trafficking, of course.
And Europol has noted this expansion.
Yeah, a Europol report we saw highlighted their growing activities across the EU, Italy, Spain, the UK, pop up again and again as major hotspots for them.
So how are these groups actually structured? Is it like a traditional pyramid with one big boss?
It's interesting, they tend to be more decentralized, a more horizontal structure, you could say. The leader of a specific clan or group is called a Nayu.
Nayu, like Godfather.
Exactly. It translates as Godfather in Romanian.
Aha.
Carries those same connotations of leadership authority, just like in, other mafia cultures.
And they have internal rules.
Oh, yes. Strong codes of silence on Marta, basically. Reports mention specific mafia tattoos sometimes being used by members. And, worryingly, connections deep within political circles.
The political connections, that's always a serious concern. It makes them harder to tackle. I also read something about Australian police finding them particularly tough nuts to crack.
Yes, that perspective came up. Police forces dealing with Romanian crime groups in Australia described them as one of the most difficult types of criminal enterprise to actually penetrate.
Why is that?
Largely because their operations are incredibly insular. They primarily deal with other Romanians. It creates this really tight-knit network, strong internal loyalty, hard for outsiders or law enforcement to get in. Plus, they have a reputation for extreme violence when they feel it's necessary.
Right, protecting their turf or
Right.
enforcing discipline.
Mm-hmm. And then there's that really significant claim, the one about a partnership over the Americas.
Ah, yes, the link up with a major cartel.
Exactly. This alleged very lucrative pact between Romanian organized crime groups and the Sinaloa cartel. I mean, their European operations are extensive enough, but this suggests cooperation at the highest levels of international organized crime, linking their perhaps money laundering networks with established drug routes. It's a big deal.
It definitely sounds like they've studied the playbook of older, more established mafia groups. There was something about a fascination with the Sicilians.
Absolutely. You see this particularly with figures in the Romanian underworld who've been around a while. A definite fascination with the Sicilian Mafia. The model they reportedly looked at was Salvatore Lo Piccolo, the Cosa Nostra boss. When he was arrested, they found his list of 10 commandments for mafia members.
So they sort of copied that idea, took inspiration, but made it their own?
Pretty much, yeah. They adapted that concept, came up with their own specific internal rules and codes. And one of the most striking ones is a general ban on using firearms.
No guns, that's unusual for organized crime, isn't it?
It is quite distinct. Leaders in the Romanian underworld often forbid using guns in confrontations. They seem to prefer more brutal methods, frankly.
Yeah.
Beatings, baseball bats, golf clubs, even swords and knives.
But aim to wound, not kill, usually.
Generally, yeah. Even with blades, the primary aim often seems to be wounding, not necessarily killing. Of course, there are always exceptions in that world, but it seems like a pattern. Maybe it's strategic, avoiding the intense police crackdown that gun violence often brings.
That is a fascinating distinction. What other rules make up their code?
Well, another interesting one is this idea of occasional collaboration between rival clans. You see leaders sometimes trying to project this image of being, open to cooperation. Maybe it's to keep things stable or for bigger operations,
Sort of uneasy truce sometimes?
perhaps. Then there's something called bloodless condemnation. Unlike some groups who'd immediately go for revenge killings, Romanian clans often seem to avoid immediate violent retaliation. The example given was the killing of a big leader, Emi Pan. The alleged killer was arrested by the police, but there wasn't this instant bloody revenge from the clan itself.
Suggests a more, maybe calculated approach? Less impulsive?
It could point that way, yeah. A more strategic way of dealing with internal beefs, perhaps?
What else? There were mentions of religion and family, too.
Yes, a strong emphasis on seeking divine favor, you could say. Underworld figures are apparently known to go to church regularly, make big donations, and in return, priests sometimes show up at their funerals.
And family.
Family is huge. There's apparently a strict rule. Mother must be loved. It's seen as an absolute duty for criminals to stay close to their mothers, provide for them.
So it's this strange mix, extreme violence potential on one hand, but then public piety and these strong family ties on the other. What about the leadership structure within the clans?
Right, so each city is meant to have its designated godfather. It's not you. And there's an expectation that if a leader dies or gets locked up, succession happens quickly to keep control.
Maintain order.
Exactly. And the code of silence, silence is golden. That's fundamental. Betrayal, talking to the cops, that carries severe penalties. And once you're in the family, Getting out is basically impossible. Too many control mechanisms, too much risk involved.
Sounds pretty standard for organized crime, that last part. How do they manage territory and decide who does what?
There's a system they call division of the territory. Apparently, clan leaders hold these councils where groups get assigned specific areas to operate in, and they get permission for certain types of crime within that area.
So you need approval to muscle in somewhere else?
Yeah, if a clan wants to branch out into new crimes or new turf, they're expected to get the okay from the regional leadership council. It's almost like a regulated illegal market structure.
Like crime franchising, almost. Any rules about personal lives, relationships?
Yes, there were a few interesting ones. It stated that it is permissible to flirt with other women, but not to divorce them. So affairs seem okay, but divorce is a no-no.
Keeps the family structure intact, maybe.
Could be. And there's a rule to respect all intimate partners, and crucially, don't desire a rival's wife. Obvious recipe for disaster, that one.
Right. Avoids internal wars.
Exactly. And finally, there's the law of discretion. Basically, don't flaunt your wealth. But the sources did note this is probably the most broken rule of the lot. People often show off their money on social media. Status symbols, I guess.
Yeah, hard to resist showing off, maybe. So, okay, a complex, sometimes contradictory rule book, but clearly designed to keep order within these groups. Let's shift focus now to their activities across Europe. Italy seems like a major hub.
Definitely. In Italy, Romanian groups are heavily into human trafficking. Mostly for sexual exploitation, women and children from Romania forced into prostitution. They're also big players, sort of intermediaries, in the drug trade.
Distributing cocaine and heroin.
Yeah, and often working with established Italian mafia groups, like the 'Ndrangheta or Camorra. Plus, you see the usual stuff: theft, robbery, and extortion, often targeting local businesses or even other Romanian immigrants living in Italy.
It sounds like they carved out niches within Italy's existing criminal underworld.
Generally, yes. Their operations there tend to be quite decentralized. Lots of independent cells, though they still connect with each other. However, in Turin, there was evidence of something more structured emerging, almost an Italian-style mafia within the Romanian community itself.
How so?
Extorting Romanian nightclubs that were running prostitution rings, even leaning on businesses and singers at weddings for money. There was this specific group, the Brigata Oarza. Back in 2014, 15 members got convicted for actual mafia association, a first for a Romanian group in Italy. The alleged boss was a former pro boxer, Viorel Luvu.
Wow, so formal mafia charges, that's significant. What about Spain? The intel suggested a really strong, powerful presence there.
Oh, absolutely. Spain is huge for them. Significant presence, real power, especially in human trafficking, forced prostitution, drug dealing, and extortion. And their influence seems quite extensive, reaching into different levels of Spanish society somehow.
And there was that one figure, Clumperu, Pighead.
Ion Clomperu, yeah. Pighead. His case really highlights the brutality. He ran one of Europe's biggest prostitution networks, trafficked women from Romania, Moldova, and horrifically marked them with barcodes, like property, indicating their supposed market value.
That is just beyond disturbing. Truly horrific.
It is. And his network, along with other Romanian factions, they really embedded themselves in Spanish cities, Madrid especially, controlling areas like the Casa de Campo Park for prostitution.
And they managed to infiltrate power structures.
That's the claim. Disturbing ability to potentially manipulate legal processes, police actions using money, bribes to protect their operations. They're known for extreme violence when needed, very strict discipline internally, and these huge international trafficking networks across Europe. You also see collaboration between different factions, figures like Nicu Guerra mentioned too, consolidating power.
It sounds like a deeply entrenched, incredibly ruthless operation in Spain. Okay, moving north to the UK. What's the picture there?
In the UK, Romanian OC groups are active in, again, human trafficking and sexual exploitation. Also drug trafficking, financial fraud is quite big there, and people smuggling.
Financial fraud. What kind of?
Sophisticated stuff. Identity theft, credit card fraud, lots of ATM manipulation, skimming. They seem to use both legal and illegal means to control trafficking victims. Maybe not always as overtly violent as in Spain, but definitely using intimidation and violence to keep control. Same strict code of silence, and they'll take extreme measures against rivals if tushed.
So a mix of the classic rackets and more modern financial crime in the UK. Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic. North America, specifically Mexico. This seems like a newer frontier for them.
Relatively, yeah.
Yeah.
Their presence in Mexico really burst into the spotlight around 2014, primarily through these incredibly sophisticated ATM skimming operations, especially in tourist hotspots like Cancun.
And the scale was massive, wasn't it?
Astonishing. By mid-2019, the estimate was they'd stolen something like $1.2 billion through these skimming schemes.
$1 billion from
Yeah.
ATMs.
Staggering, I know. A guy named Florian Tudor, nicknamed El Tiburon, the shark, he emerged as the central figure, got arrested, then released, and in the process, he implicated another guy, Constantin Marcu, who was then killed shortly after. Messy stuff.
Definitely. And it didn't stop there.
No. In 2021, more arrests at Cancun airport. Investigations led to freezing loads of bank accounts, including some belonging to prominent Mexican business figures, even political figures. Reports suggested Mexican and Venezuelan hackers were part of the operation, too.
So corruption reaching high levels.
It certainly seems that way. It even led to the removal of a state legislative leader in Quintana Roo because of alleged ties to this mafia group. And as we touched on earlier, this is where the alleged partnership with the Sinaloa cartel comes into play.
That link again. A truly chilling alliance connecting a major European group with one of the world's most powerful drug cartels really drives home their global reach and ambition.
Okay, let's just quickly recap some of the main crime types again, just to underscore the sheer scope. Good idea. Human trafficking has to be right at the top. They're a massive player in Europe, trafficking men, women, children for forced labor, sex work, servitude, often using those false promises of jobs or a better life to lure people in.
Deplorable. And drugs.
Drug trafficking is another absolute core activity.
Right.
Cocaine, heroin, synthetic drugs. Romania itself is often used as a key transit point into the rest of Europe. And again, those reported collaborations with groups like Italy's Ndrangheta.
And it's not just the trafficking, they run the exploitation side, too.
Exactly. Running extensive organized prostitution rings, brothels, escort services often directly fed by the human trafficking pipelines. Then you have illegal gambling and betting, underground casinos, betting rings, loan sharking too, playing on vulnerable people with illegal high-interest loans.
And theft.
Can't forget organized theft. Everything from high-value targets jewelry, art, down to systematic shoplifting and burglary rings, all feeding into black market channels for profit.
It really is a diversified criminal portfolio, incredibly adaptable. Okay, to make this even more concrete, let's talk about some specific names, notable figures, and the actual crime groups operating in Bucharest. That seems to be ground zero, right?
Bucharest is definitely a key nerve center. And yeah, several notorious figures have dominated the scene there over the years. Ion Balint, better known as Niu Kamataru. He's got a very long, well-documented rap sheet. Extortion, prostitution, fraud, usury loan sharking, basically.
A big name for a long time.
Then there was Constantin Costel Corduneanu. Quite a story. He was actually an Olympic wrestler for Romania.
A wrestler, wow.
Yeah, then became this major organized crime figure, reportedly involved in human trafficking, drug trafficking, managed to avoid major convictions for a lot of his life, though got done for inciting online crime later on. His funeral recently was apparently quite a big event, drew a lot of attention.
From Olympian to crime boss.
Yeah.
Quite the path. Who else stands out?
Vasil Domnu, known as Liderica. He controlled the prostitution market around Bucharest's main train station, Gara de Nord, for years, known for violent clashes. Reports say he later shifted into real estate. Then Vasily Fierbanti, Sili Pietroi, reputation for violence, even allegedly threatened a police officer. Florin Gnia Ganosu, considered extremely dangerous, accused of pimping, money laundering, human trafficking.
Okay.
Petri Guranu, who called himself Emperor of the World, ran real estate extortion rackets, debt collection, and of course Ion Klamparu, Pighead, who we already discussed, with that massive international prostitution ring.
Quite the rogues gallery. Powerful, often violent individuals.
What about the clans themselves, the main groups operating within Bucharest?
Right. Several clans hold significant sway in the capital. You've got the Karen clan, active in the Pantilimon district, also out in Cluj-Napoca, mostly into usury and prostitution. Leader named Aurel Raducan.
Then the Sportivilla clan, the Sportsman clan, based in Sector 4. They reportedly have serious influence in government, law enforcement, politics, making money from blackmail, usury, protection rackets, security firms, real estate. Radu Roca is seen as the leader there.
Influencing government and law enforcement. That's deeply concerning.
It is. Then the Venchika clan. They started with money lending in Sectors 1 and 4, then got into smuggled cigarettes. Apparently expanded when the Kantaru leaders were jailed for a bit, and there's talk of an alliance with the Sportivaler clan, possibly to challenge the Kamatari. Leaders are Likea and Danuadila.
So constant power struggles and shifting alliances, it sounds like.
Absolutely. It's a dynamic, dangerous environment. You also have the Chira clan in the Fundini area and beyond, and involved in usury, drugs, prostitution, but also, interestingly, seemingly legitimate businesses, scrap metal, agriculture, livestock. A common tactic, using legit businesses as fronts.
Right, for laundering money.
Probably. The Kokalar and Orsari clans are also active, mostly in Sector 3. The less specific detail was available in our main activities in our sources. The Duwenelor clan, across Sectors 2 and 6, seems to have a looser structure but involved in prostitution, usury, blackmail. Former leaders were Ion Sager Dugiano and Nicolae Pian Dugiano, the one whose death led to that bloodless condemnation example.
Ah, right, MEPN.
Yes, sorry, MEPN was Nicolae Dugiano. Then, of course, the Kamaterular clan. Despite leaders Ianoyu and Vasile Kamatero Bilent facing jail time periodically, they remain a major force. Usury, prostitution, blackmail, operating citywide from their base in Sector 5.
Still powerful despite arrests.
Seems so. The Torah clan, Sectors 4 and 5, reportedly focuses on international drug trafficking and prostitution. Leader Ian Voyne, Jan Aluid Tuaka. And lastly, the Vasloi clan in Sector 6. Started with protection rackets, debt collection, but like others shifted more into real estate. Allegations of political protection floating around them too. Leaders, George Dinka and Vasily Miki Dinka.
It's an incredibly complex, deeply embedded criminal landscape just within Bucharest. All these clans fighting for territory, profit across so many illegal markets really hammers home the scale of organized crime within Romania itself.
Definitely. So just to kind of wrap up the key points, we've seen how Romanian organized crime grew from those informal networks back in the communist days, really blossoming after '89 and evolving into a major international criminal player.
Yeah, involved in just about
A
everything.
huge range of activities: human trafficking, drugs, cybercrime, financial scams, operating across continents, forging these worrying links with other major groups like the Sinaloa cartel.
And following their own unique, sometimes strange set of internal rules, with Bucharest acting as the central hub for numerous powerful, often warring clans.
Their global reach and their sheer adaptability are, well, they're truly remarkable, aren't they? They might not always be the first group you think of, but these networks are clearly very active, very embedded in numerous countries and criminal markets around the world.
Absolutely. Which kind of leads us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over.
Given everything we've discussed, this proven ability of Romanian organized crime networks to expand, to adapt, to find new niches, what might be the next stage for them? What could be their next big area of focus?
And maybe more importantly, what challenges does that ongoing evolution pose for international law enforcement? How do agencies combat these kinds of transnational threats in a world that's just getting more and more connected?
Yeah, it's a really complex problem with some pretty significant far-reaching implications to think about.